15 years ago today, Doctor Who returned to our screens with Christopher Eccleston as the Doctor and Billie Piper as Rose Tyler. Now, the Who fan world is about to undergo a mass tweet-along to that first episode using the hashtag Trip of a Lifetime. But let's get into it with my review of Rose 15 years later. I remember when I first watched the first half of this episode, and that might sound a bit strange, but at the time I had pretty rubbish internet. I had a dial-up connection, which was quite common in Australia back there, and, it wasn't very good internet, whereas now in Australia, a friend of mine had this thing called broadband, and I will not use his full name here, but CH, if you're watching, yes, you got me my copy of Rose, specifically the copy that leaked. A screener copy from a Canadian distributor or broadcaster leaked onto the internet. It differs slightly from the broadcast version. There's differences in the sound mix, and of course there is a different arrangement of the theme tune as well, arranged by Mark Ayres from the original Delia Derbyshire recordings. Now, I did say I remember watching the first half. Pretty much what happened was the postman came, I had the DVD, put it in the DVD player, but I needed to be at work in an hour, and work was half an hour away. I worked at a KFC back then. So I thought, I'll just watch the first half and then go do my 8-hour shift at work and come back and watch the rest. Can I tell you, longest 8-hour shift of my life. What a stupid decision. No one at work was looking forward to Doctor Who. No one at work was a Doctor Who fan. So I had to suffer. And they probably had to suffer as well, because I was probably telling them about it. At the time, I can't tell you the massive relief this episode was. Now, I'm someone who really enjoyed the 1996 telemovie with Paul McGann, and of course there had been so many attempts to restart Doctor Who after that, with webcasts like Real Time and Death Comes to Time and Shada and Scream of the Shalka just before this, which was meant to be the official continuation because BBC I didn't know what the BBC was doing in terms of bringing back Doctor Who. Just to have this episode that was so vibrant and alive and different, but still the same as Doctor Who as it was when it went off the air, it was just this massive relief. Because we'd heard rumours that it was going to be a reboot, and then we heard rumours that it was going to ignore every Doctor after Tom Baker. Someone misunderstood something Russell T Davies said about looking back to the Tom Baker era, but what he meant was it was in the public consciousness and that was the kind of show he wanted to create. Indeed, Russell T Davies then said Rose is heavily influenced by Ace, being the final classic series companion who is a streetwise Londoner, an attempt to give a companion a bit more grounded in the reality of viewers. And that is where Rose, the episode, and Rose, the character, really succeeds in this. Rose is a young woman who lives on a council estate with her mum. She works in a department store. She lives and works in a very recognisable London / Cardiff, but most of the London shots in this episode are shot in London, funnily enough. And by doing that, it grounds Rose in the real world. Billie Piper here is outstanding. And another thing, when she was announced, at the time she had done very little professional acting, but she was classically trained as an actress, or at the very least trained. You know, sometimes when you say classically trained, people are like, well, she didn't go to RADA. No, didn't go to RADA, so you're classic. But a lot of people kind of went, oh, who's this pop star coming into Doctor Who? Oh, this will never work. Oh, it's Bonnie Langford all over again. Well, one, Bonnie Langford is fabulous, so if you don't like Bonnie Langford, 2, Billie Piper is simply amazing in the role. I think she's just really wonderful here and really warm and really likeable. and at the same time has that quiet frustration that I'm sure a lot of us feel. And so by us stepping into the character of Rose, we're drawn along in the show. And to top it all off, she saves the day at the end, just as we would want to as well. She got the Jericho Street under 7 gymnastics bronze medal. That's the thing, Rose isn't even a gold medalist in a gymnastics competition from 12 years ago. She's the bronze medalist. She's not a perfect character. She's not a Mary Sue who comes in and solves everyone's problems. She's got her own foibles. She ignores obvious signs of danger because she's too focused on the Doctor. I will come back to that. But that makes her more identifiable and more likeable because none of us is flawless, and Rose is not flawless either. Now, I mentioned Rose first, the episode's named after her, but the show, of course, is named after the Doctor. And my word, Christopher Eccleston. Now, Billie Piper I had, of course, heard of. Eccleston I hadn't really heard of all that much, and before this came on I sought out and watched The Second Coming, which is the show he made before this with Russell T Davies, where he is the second coming of Jesus. And so I had a little bit of an idea of what he was like as an actor, but he blew me away here. And again, watching it, Christopher Eccleston remains my favourite Doctor of the new series, possibly because, spoiler alert, he only did 1 year, and it's just such a perfect unit. You know what I mean? And there's the promise of what is to come, and that promise is evident here. One thing Christopher Eccleston said in recent years is that he doesn't think he got the humour of the character right, but I think it's perfect. Right from when he realises he hadn't asked Rose's name, asks her name, and then tells her to run for her life with a big grin on his face. He pivots on the comic to the dramatic, and he does it so well. That bit with the Millennium Wheel behind him, and he can't see the big round transmitter he's looking for. And yet there is a sadness to him and a melancholy. And Chris plays that perfectly as well. When he wants to talk to the Nestene consciousness, there's a resignation to him. He knows it won't go well, but he's going to try anyway. And then when it brings up the war, which we'll find out more about as this series goes along, there's just such pain in his voice when he talks about the planets he couldn't save. An exemplary performance from Christopher Eccleston, his speech about feeling the turn of the Earth, coming just immediately after a pratfall comedy sequence, and of course the classic bit where Jackie attempts to chat him up a bit, and he realises what's happening and just says, no. Now that brings us to Jackie. Camille Coduri, one of the best things about the new series, and of course Mickey, played by Noel Clarke. Now, in this first episode, they're both rather broad, and that is a kind of a general fault of this episode. And look, it's a chicken and egg situation. Keith Boak directed this episode, episode 4 and episode 5. As we know now, big falling out with Christopher Eccleston earlier on, so this block is always kind of tarnished. And at the same time, it's the first block. Everyone is learning what they're doing on this show, which has not been produced as a regular series for 16 years at this point. We have to wonder, would Keith Boak's direction have improved had he directed more blocks of the series? As it is, I don't think his direction is necessarily bad, it just feels very flat in places, and as I mentioned earlier with that obvious danger that Rose is in, the whole sort of waxy face on Mickey, it's just a bit too pronounced. And if I had to pick one flaw in Keith Boak's direction, there are moments where things are just a bit too pronounced. The Autons are otherworldly, so they move really jerkily, whereas in the original show they were very smooth and silent and very fast. But to be honest, that's only something you notice when viewing it again and again and again. But what just comes through is this confident reinterpretation of the show. It's saying, this is who we are, this is our mission, we're in London, we've got Rose, who is this 19-year-old shop worker who can save the world. We've got this mysterious stranger with a TARDIS, this blue box, which can travel in time and space. And that's all you need to know. As for the design, we've got Eccleston's costume, which brilliantly pairs back the sort of silhouette of the Doctor just to its components. You know, he's still got a coat with lapels, but it's a leather jacket now. He's just got a jumper underneath, but it still has that V, which is evocative of a waistcoat, which is evocative of a shirt collar. It's back to basics, because if you look at 80s Doctor Who, and even the telly movie, there was a tendency to over-design the Doctor's costume, rather than have it be something that could be cobbled together off the rack. Eccleston's costume, I once saw someone say on a Doctor Who forum, it's the first time you can accidentally cosplay as the Doctor. And that's something Russell T Davies wanted to bring in as well, and that's why, just little things, the TARDIS key goes back to being a standard Yale-type key, because that way every kid who has a Yale lock on their door has a key to the TARDIS. And that's just an amazing idea. The sonic screwdriver's back, it finally lights up, and look, I've got 2 of those at home. I have the one with the invisible ink pen underneath. It's a great toy to have, and, you know, it updates the design, but it's still a tubular thing. It's got a light on the end now. I know Troughton's had a light, but the others didn't have a light, so it has a light now. So you can see when it's going, I suppose, because this version of Doctor Who is so confidently visual, which culminates when Rose enters the TARDIS. Nice little callback to An Unearthly Child. The TARDIS is out the back with the bins in a junkyard. The close-up of Rose's face as she initially takes in what she sees is like the close-up of Barbara's face when she first forces herself into the TARDIS. And then we even get a similar camera move, a sort of pan around the TARDIS to see what it's like. Now, CH, who first sent me these episodes, said, "I'm warning you, it's like an overturned washing up bowl." I loved it immediately. It's not the clean, stark white lines of most of the classic series TARDISes. It's not the gothic of the season 14 TARDIS or the telemovie TARDIS. It's its new own thing. I can't remember when we started calling it the Coral TARDIS. It was before Peter Davison mentions it in Time Crash. It may have been something they said in Doctor Who Confidential. I miss Doctor Who Confidential. The struts, the glowing console, the way everything shudders, all the pipes coming down, the time column going up into the ceiling and then out around like it's some kind of fountain. Absolutely love it. Flawless design. Not my favourite of the new series console rooms, but it's pretty bloody good. And then there's the ending. Rose saves the Doctor and Mickey, and then she lets him get away. She lets the Doctor leave because she wants to look after her mum and to look after Mickey. And she immediately regrets it. And the Doctor comes back and says, "Oh, I didn't tell you, it travels in time." And that's the first time we see the TARDIS take off. It's been flitting about here and there, but we've just heard it leave before, then we've travelled inside it when it moves, and now all the kids at home get to see what it looks like when it actually travels, and when it comes back. And I love the wind effect the TARDIS gets in the new series. You know, the displacement of matter means this almighty wind whips up. It becomes a physical effect. The TARDIS landing has a physical effect on its surroundings. And my God, do I cry every time Rose runs into the TARDIS at the end. Absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. It's an 8 out of 10 from me. It is a brilliantly solid opening episode. It doesn't pull its punches, but at the same time it kind of tells you the best is yet to come. And that's what you want from a first episode. You don't want your first episode to be the best of the series, because it needs to grow, it needs to build. That being said, there's very little this episode could have done better. Perhaps more nuanced direction, as I said, but I can't fault Christopher Eccleston or Billie Piper. I cannot fault the script. There's poor Clive, you know, another normal person, and we see what can happen to normal people like Rose. They can die, like Clive does. So it gives us that danger without having to kill a companion character. And that is really, really effective. 8 out of 10. Absolutely brilliant stuff. So I put the call out on Twitter for some of your comments, and thank you so much, those of you who wrote in. It is not too late to write in for episodes 2, 3 and 4, The End of the World, Aliens of London, World War 3. I'll be recording them this weekend. I meant to record them last weekend, but other stuff came up. So if you want to chuck them in under this video, you've got about a day to get them in. So, without any further ado, some comments from Rose. Matt Moir comments, Rose brilliantly set up the new show, as well as showcasing perfectly what this era was going to be like. I agree with you entirely there, Matt. By the way, yeah, I do have, oh, wrong way around, a Clayton Hickman Space Girl phone case with Sarah Jane Smith. So my old friend Blaine Coughlin writes, Rose was incredible. I just couldn't believe that Doctor Who was back on TV. I watched that episode at least 2 or 3 times a day for an entire week. I don't think I watched it quite that much, but I think I did watch it about 5 times in the week. It was so different, glossy, slick, hilarious and dramatic, yet it was still undeniably the same program from my childhood. Totally agree, Blaine. Thank you for writing in. Cliff Chapman, who performs with Big Finish, I believe, wrote in, I was delighted it was back and loved Eccleston and Piper. Piper especially, because the last pop star that turned out to be a really good actor was probably David Bowie. Bowie? David Bowie? Gonna have to hand in my gay card, aren't I? Enjoyed much of the first 3, but felt the endings were a bit weak and rushed. Now that was a criticism of this season at the time. I remember that. People kind of said, you know, everything ends with an explosion, possibly a bit rushed. I think we're kind of used to that now, but yeah, at the time, compressing the story into the 45-minute slot was something really new, and I think you may have a point there, Cliff, but I also think there are episodes this season which are worse offenders. My very dear friend Stephen Alexander, whom I used to make Doctor Who audio plays with in the UK, writes, Rose will always feel fresh and exciting. It's got such a pace to it as it introduces the basic concepts of the show, our new companion, her friends and family, and runs an alien invasion at the same time. Love it. This story does so much in its 45 minutes. You're absolutely right. And it does it with such confidence, such breathlessness. It sweeps you along rather than dragging you along. Russell T Davies is an amazingly economic writer, but also a very witty one, and can work pages of meaning into a single speech. And I'm thinking again of that Turn of the Earth speech. There is so much meaning in there from Russell's words and from Chris's performance, but it doesn't stop the episode. It slows it down for a moment, and then boom, we're off again. Absolutely brilliant. Pete Lambert, or in this case, very Pete Lambert. Rose, I was stratospherically delighted. It was as good as Buffy, it was as funny as Buffy, and that's the hardest seasoning to get right. Russell T Davies has said many times that Buffy was an influence. Buffy the Vampire Slayer had come along in the mid to late 90s and kind of revolutionised both the teen drama and the fantasy drama. There's so much TV that owes so much to Buffy and Joss Whedon's style of writing, and I can really see why Russell wanted to seek that out. Green-fingered librarian Simon Hart, another one of my old compatriots from Planet Skaro Audios. He in fact played companion to my Doctor. Rose seemed so fast-paced on the day. Like coming into the middle of an old story, it was a glorious rebirth. That's something I feel a lot about episodes of the new series. It's like episode 1 is compressed into sort of 5 minutes, but here the Doctor's already in the middle of his adventure when Rose meets him, and it's really clever in that it just speeds up the story. Johnny Morris, writer for Big Finish, writer of novels, fantastic writer, loved Rose. At last, the Doctor Who on TV was as good as the Doctor Who in my head, and he would know because he creates Doctor Who in his head. The Jixter? Rose, I admit my overriding memory is Graham Norton talking over the first few minutes. This is true. Strictly Come Dancing, the final, had been on before. It was a live show, and as Rose is exploring the basement and first meets the Autons, some of the audio got accidentally mixed in there. It's not on the DVD. I think you can find it on YouTube, though. Besides that, it was a great introductory episode. The Autons feel they're more a nostalgia perspective rather than a real threat. Yeah, I think that's a fair comment. I don't think we had a really big Auton story yet, where they're sort of at the height of their powers. Jackie and Rose were great, Mickey okay, wheelie bin naff. It's like, I love the idea of the wheelie bin, I don't even mind the burp, it's just another example, I think, of the direction being slightly too flat for the sequence. It should be funny at the end when the bin burps, but the whole thing is funny. It should start funny, be a big threat, and then be funny at the end, but it's just funny all the way through, unfortunately. But minor criticism. From Connor, A TARDIS Travels, when I was 7 years old in 2005... 7 years old. Mate, I'm 37 this year, Connor. When I was 7 years old in 2005, I had no knowledge of classic Who. Oh, I'm sorry. No, really, I'm genuinely sorry. I'm glad you do now. And living in Ireland, the only Who DVD I managed to get a hold of was Volume 1 of Series 1, so I watched those first 3 episodes every day for months. It's safe to say I love those episodes dearly. That's actually really nice, Connor. That's beautiful, and what a 3 to start with. And Rose as your first Doctor Who experience. Marvellous. And finally from Richard Brink Johnson, another one of my compatriots from Planet Scar Audios. Don't have anything original to say except to acknowledge that 230605 was my 26th birthday, which makes you older than me. So Rose has always held a special place in my heart. Well, I think that's a good note to end on, to say happy birthday, Richard Brink Johnson. Now, I will be back next week with a review of The End of the World, and also my final perambulate with Picard, by which time I may just be walking up and down on my balcony. Say Something Nice will be returning shortly. I now have my flat back in order to shoot some videos in, and who knows, if I'm forced to quarantine myself at home, I may have more time to shoot videos. Until then, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy the tweet along with Doctor Who Rose, because this year is going to be the trip of a lifetime. And I will see you next week for The End of the World. Thank you so much for watching.